response to this series has been very gratifying, and we intend to make each show available to the general public in the weeks ahead. To receive any or all of the shows of this series, The Jewish State in Israel, we need your email, which can be sent to us at our email, which is blueandwhitefacts@gmail.com. Again, I repeat it. Our email is blueandwhitefacts, F-A-C-T-S, @gmail.com. The primary goal of this series is and has been to distribute the real facts of the history of the Jewish state in Israel, beginning with Joshua crossing of the Jordan River in 1273 BCE. The ensuing 1400 years until the Roman destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem, and ultimately the fall of Beitar, and then the birth of Muhammad in 671 CE, and the history of the years until the creation of the new Jewish state of Israel in 1948. In his classic historical work, The Middle East, by Bernard Lewis, Lewis describes how after 610 CE, Islam created a practice of forcible conversion, which spread quickly and engulfed all of the Middle East, the southern Mediterranean, Spain, and even much of Asia. Jewish communities maintained some degree of independence, but were encouraged to accept the fact that Muhammad was the last in a long series of divinely appointed apostles, beginning with Moses and Christ, and the Quran superseded the Torah and the Gospels. Muhammad and the Muslim world discarded many Jewish customs, but the focus of Muslim anti-Semitism was more political subjugation and social humiliation. Jews were officially given some religious freedom, as described in the 8th century Covenant of Uman, which outlined a special head tax Jews were required to pay. As Muhammad began to swing the sword, literally and physically, of the Arabs in the Arab world on the infidels in the 7th century, his devoted followers undertook the task of world conquest. Their initial successes propelled them into a head-on conflict with Christian Europe. In 732 CE, Charles Martel defeated Abd al-Rahman in a decisive battle and briefly arrested the Muslim progress into all of Europe. As a result, Islam concentrated on consolidating their empire, which straddled the Mediterranean basin. Included in this vast area was the home of over 90% of the Jewish people, which included Israel, Egypt, and Babylonia. Indeed, the main center of Jewish life at that time was in Babylonia. Two Europes existed from the 8th century to 11th centuries. One was Muslim Spain, the other Christian Europe. Islam was much more tolerant of Jews and Judaism than Christianity. As long as Jews kept a low profile and agreed to follow humiliating laws and practices, they were given much personal and religious freedom. Because the Jews were monotheistic and obedient to the Islamic rules, they were treated fairly leniently, at least compared to the Christian population. Moreover, Islam had nothing to gain in exterminating the literate, industrious Jewish communities, which provided them with reliable tax income and were key elements of the administrative intelligentsia of non-Arab territories. Moreover, Jews were no military threat at that time, and indeed, most Jews at that time even spoke Arabic. Throughout the Arab world, Jews were traders as well as doctors, astronomers, and bankers. When Islam invaded Spain in 1111, Jews helped them overrun garrisons in Cordova, Granada, and Toledo. However, fundamental sects of Islam soon came to dominate, putting Jews in mortal danger. Jewish massacres occurred in Cordoba and Granada particularly. Indeed, Maimonides, the Rambam, was forced to flee to Egypt. Until the 19th century, Jews were only sporadically the target of Muslim hatred. Jewish life was generally modest and poverty-stricken, but was more stable and peaceful and secure under Muslim rule than it was in Christian Europe. The situation began to change, though, in the 19th century with the decline of the Ottoman Empire and the eventual emergence of the powers of England, France, and Russia. Under intense external and internal pressure, the Ottoman Empire collapsed, and free elections were promised, but actually were never delivered. As the Ottoman Empire dissolved, Britain and France seized control by 1911 of all of North Africa, from Egypt to Morocco. In the ensuing World War I, Islamic forces allied themselves with the Christian European forces. At the beginning of World War I, over 1 million Jews lived under Muslim rule in Iran, Tunisia, Morocco, Egypt, Iraq, and Yemen. That's over 1 million Jews. World War I brought the end of the Ottoman Empire and the secularization in the Muslim world that had been so resisted for so long. But with it came deep hatred of Western values and the Jewish people, and the hatred of the Jews that were still living in every Muslim country. Moreover, the success of Zionism and the inability of Islam to stop the creation of the Jewish state of Israel intensified Muslim hatred of Jews. In addition, Jews were no longer paying homage to the Muslim world, nor paying tax to be protected. With the creation again of a Jewish state in Israel, tensions flared and hatred engulfed the region. Shelley, we'd love to hear more from you.
Thank you, Bob. Good evening, and once again, I would like to express our sincerest thanks to all of our listeners who have taken the time to tune in. Many, many thanks. The often voiced exclamation, "We are our own worst enemy," is often used by many a Jew when at odds with a fellow Jew. We are, in fact, a stubborn, hard-headed people who so often disagree with one another on matters of religious observance, family background, social standing, and any other issue, either large or small, be it significant or insignificant. We are a people of diverse thoughts and opinions, and so often go about arguing with one another, fighting with one another. What we must never forget, however, is that those who hate us and seek our destruction couldn't care less about what we believe or how we observe, couldn't care less as to how we dress or appear in public. We are examined through one lens and one lens only, namely the lens of hate. Yesterday it was Hitler, and today it's Hamas. Our enemies have always been and continue to be as clear as day in their desire to see the eradication of all Jews. And there are to be no exceptions. Open your eyes, my friends. We may be a diverse people, but we are all equally demonized and hated, irrespective of our differences. Yet even after the October 7th tragedy, when innocent men, women, and children were slaughtered and beheaded, there are Jews who firmly believe that it is the Jews who are at fault, and that Hamas simply reacted to the Israeli occupation of Palestine. Israel is viewed by some of our very own people as an occupier, an evil nation that has enslaved the Palestinians. Let us begin by examining a full-page ad placed by the Jewish Voice for Peace Rabbinical Council that appeared in the January 26th, 2024 New York Times, just recently. In large, bold print, the ad begins, "Dear President Biden, as American rabbis, we write to you with deep sorrow and fury. Tomorrow is International Holocaust Remembrance Day, a time to honor the memory of the millions of people murdered through the genocide committed by the Nazi regime, including 6 million of our own Jewish ancestors. We will also remember," the ad says, "this as the time in which Israel was committing a genocide aided and abetted by the United States. We know how painful it is for Jews to grasp that a Jewish state could possibly commit a genocide. Nevertheless, we are compelled to speak with moral clarity about what is happening to Palestinians." The ad then goes on describing how the Israeli military is murdering thousands of innocent Palestinians and holding back food, medicine, and shelter. Some of you may be asking, did I hear that right? Are these Jews speaking? Are Jews making these outrageous allegations? Yes, my dear friends, these are Jews speaking. In the entire full-page ad, no mention was made of the slaughter of innocent Jews that preceded this war, a war perpetrated by Hamas. Nowhere is it mentioned that Jewish women and children were beheaded. Who and what is this Jewish Voice for Peace? It sounds more like the Jewish Voice for Self-Hatred. The ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, reports that on October the 7th, 2023, the very same day Hamas terrorists invaded Israel and killed 1,400 Israelis while kidnapping over 200 people, including Americans, most of whom were civilians, the Jewish Voice for Peace released a statement claiming that the source of all of this violence was Israeli apartheid and occupation, the United States' complicity in that oppression. In interviews, Jewish Voice for Peace Executive Director Stephanie Fox and Jewish Voice for Peace Action Political Director Beth Miller both said that Israel was the root cause of the violence. Prominent Jewish Voice for Peace activist Ariel Koren said she believed Hamas actions were consistent with Palestinians' right to resist. In the weeks following the invasion and brutal attacks on Israelis, Jewish Voice for Peace chapters were active on social media and have sponsored or co-sponsored dozens of anti-Israeli rallies across the United States. In several instances, Jewish Voice for Peace speakers at its rallies have expressed explicit support for terror against Israel or even overt anti-Semitism. For example, Jewish Voice for Peace DC Metro shared a post on Instagram promoting Resistance News Network, a radical anti-Zionist English-language channel on Telegram and Instagram that promotes violence and terrorism against Israel. At a recent meeting, an organizer for Jewish Voice for Peace exclaimed that he, the speaker, is one of so many Jews across the country and around the world who, with our whole beings, reject Zionism as the racist colonial ideology that it is. How is this possible, you may ask? How could Jews with any knowledge of our history react this way? How could there be Jews who support movements and organizations that are patently anti-Semitic and who seek to destroy the state of Israel? Jewish self-hatred or Jewish self-loathing is a topic that defies logic and common sense. Knowing that we are all in the same boat, so to speak, how can this self-hatred exist? In a book entitled Chutzpah, written by Alan Dershowitz, Professor Dershowitz details a number of well-recognized Jews who proudly profess their anti-Zionism, anti-Israel beliefs. Perhaps best known is Professor Noam Chomsky of MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, who bemoans the existence of the Jewish state of Israel. It should therefore come as no surprise that this staunch anti-Zionist had previously given support to a neo-Nazi Holocaust denier by the name of Robert Forison, who belittled Holocaust survivors, claiming that survivors supposedly perpetrated a hoax. Unbelievable. The Holocaust never occurred, states Forison. The gas chambers never existed. And that Jews, yes, Jews, caused World War II. The Holocaust was, in fact, an outright lie concocted by American Zionists, he states, who hoped to benefit Israel, and that the true victims were the German people and the Palestinians. How Chomsky, a Jewish linguistic professor at MIT, supports these outright lies is beyond understanding. Can anyone possibly not point to Chomsky, whose parents were Hebrew teachers, as a self-hating Jew? An anti-Zionist Hasidic group, Neturei Karta, that stands side by side with anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist groups protesting the Israel Day parade, speaks quite clearly on its website about its views on the matter. Their words leave little doubt as to their core beliefs. The true Jews, as they state, remain faithful to Jewish belief and are not contaminated with Zionism. The true Jews are against dispossessing the Arabs of their lands and homes. According to the Torah, they say, the land should be returned to them. Lastly, let's hear from Jewish political scientist Norman Finkelstein, whose primary fields of interest are matters relating to the Holocaust and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Finkelstein's parents were both Holocaust survivors, a useful fact that makes his outrageous lies believable to his followers and the politically naive. Finkelstein gained popularity and recognition in 2000 after writing his book, The Holocaust Industry, in which he claims that some exploit the memory of the Holocaust as an ideological weapon to provide Israel immunity to criticism. A staunch critic of Israel, he was denied entry to Israel and banned from entering the country for 10 years in 2008. Finkelstein has called Israel the Jewish supremacist state and accuses Israel of committing the crime of apartheid against the Palestinian people. Through personal accounts in one of his books, he compares the plight of the Palestinians living under Israeli occupation with the horrors of the Nazis. Finkelstein's latest book on Palestine and Israel is Gaza, an inquest into its martyrdom. Dear listeners, take a moment or two and think about these outrageous remarks made by a Jew, one of our own. Gabriel Schoenfeld, in his work The Return of Anti-Semitism, quite correctly asserts that Finkelstein's statements many a time approach Holocaust denial by declaring that Jewish organizations have been manufacturing non-existent Holocaust survivors in the endeavor to fill their coffers and augment their powers. These are but a few examples of notable Jewish individuals and groups who despise all that is Jewish, whether it be the religion, the Jewish state of Israel, and individuals who appear to be too Jewish. Alan Dershowitz has been prophetic in his insightful analysis of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. Long before the slaughter of Israeli innocents on October the 7th, many Jews were willing to distort history in order to achieve their goal of bringing about peace in the Middle East. There has long been an element in the Jewish community that has been hypocritical of Judaism, Jews, and Israel. The radical left has consistently vilified Israel. Jews in the radical left therefore felt the need to divorce themselves from supporting Israel and give full support to the Palestinians, irrespective of the harm or implications. This desire to gain acceptance by political groups and in some cases countries has turned some Jews against their Jewish brothers so as to save face and be assured of acceptance by anti-Israel groups and occasionally from outright anti-Semites. Says Dershowitz, and I quote, Palestinian propaganda uses the anti-Israel tirades voiced by some Jews as proof that the Palestinian position is unquestionably correct. In his eye-opening work, The Case for Israel, Professor Dershowitz seeks to educate those Jews on the left who view Zionism and Israel with disdain. Let me quote, Let me directly address the growing number of students and young people, says Dershowitz, who are joining the legion of bigots who can see no right on the side of Israel and no wrong on the side of those who seek to destroy the Jewish state and transfer its Jewish population. You are on the wrong side of history, he states, Dershowitz. You are on the wrong side of morality and justice. You have perhaps inadvertently joined hands with forces of evil that have for millennia imposed a double standard against everything Jewish. You are on the side of those who supported Hitler's Holocaust and who denied it occurred. You are assisting those who are once again targeting babies, children, women, and the elderly just because they are Jewish. You are in very bad company. Nor can you continue to hide behind claims of ignorance because the facts are so easily available to anyone who wants to think for himself or herself. Think for yourself. Learn the facts. Listen to all sides. And if you are a person of goodwill, I am confident, says Alan Dershowitz, that you will no longer see this complex issue as one-sidedly anti-Israel. You owe it to yourself and to history not to remain complicit with a new variant of the world's oldest prejudice. In conclusion, I would like to quote Bret Stephens just one last time, and I quote, knowing who our friends aren't isn't pleasant, particularly after so many Jews have sought to be personal friends and political allies to people and movements that, as we grieved, turned their backs on us. But it is also clarifying. More than 3,800 years of Jewish history keeps yielding the same bracing lesson. In the long run, we're alone. In the final analysis, I would like to end by hoping that these self-hating Jews will eventually learn that they are currently looked up to and applauded not for who they are, but because of the anti-Israel, anti-Jewish beliefs that they espouse. At the end of the day, they are still despised Jews who would have been forced along with their brothers and sisters into the gas chambers by Hitler and mercilessly slaughtered and beheaded by Hamas. Have a good evening. Thank you all so much. And Am Yisrael Chai. Bob?
It's so well done, Shelley. It's interesting what Alan Dershowitz said about them being on the wrong side of history. And the reason why they are on the wrong side of history is because they don't know history. It's easy to be on the wrong side of history if you don't know history. And one of the main purposes of this series is to teach people what the history of the Jewish people in Israel, and generally speaking, has been over the last 5,000 years. It's so important that we have knowledge, we have data, we have facts to support our beliefs and our knowledge of the way things have been, rather than being stumped by attacks and charges against us as a people, as a nation. By knowing history, we can defend ourselves and the role the Jewish people have had in the last 5,000 years. And hopefully this series is providing people with the opportunity to gather that information and those facts and that data so that they can do that in their discussions, in their debates, in their confrontations with those who would try to undermine Judaism, and particularly Judaism in so far as the Jewish state of Israel is concerned. Hopefully it is accomplishing that, and hopefully when you get the series through the email, you'll be able to gather the data to be able to support your efforts with friends, with neighbors, with acquaintances, and with those who are interested in hearing what the information and data and facts truly are. Have a good night, and again, as Shelley said, I'm Yisrael Chai.